I'm Reid, Executive Director of the National Lighting Bureau, and I'm here with Dr. Sophia Axelrod, a sleep researcher in the laboratory of Michael W. Young. This interview is part of our Let's Talk About Light and Health series, and the name of this session is A New Kind of Lullaby, Robust Light-Dark Pattern for Babies. Dr. Axelrod, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you. And the first thing I have to do is tell our audience a little bit about the Nobel Prize you won in 2017.
It wasn't actually me who won the prize. It was my mentor, Michael Young. And he basically discovered a long time ago in these little fruit flies that we have genes in our bodies that control when we sleep, when we eat, when anything really happens in our physiology. And it turns out that humans have the same exact genes, and that's what he won the Nobel Prize for.
Tell our audience a little bit about your background.
I studied biology, and I've always been fascinated in how our bodies work. And as I studied, I realized I really wanted to dig deeper and understand the genetics and the molecular biology and the cell biology of what really happens in our bodies. And I later realized that people now even study behavior with these tools of genetics. And so I joined Mike's lab to basically use these molecular tools to dissect something as complex as sleep. And I figured we might as well use something as simple as a fruit fly to do that, because we believe that all animals sleep, including flies. So you might as well understand it in them and then translate it potentially to, something as big and complex as a human. And yeah, and I was working in the lab and kind of making progress on my project around the fundamentals of why we sleep and how we sleep, which is actually not clear. We do it every night, but we don't really understand from a scientific perspective what happens in the body and how it's really regulated. So that's what I was studying in the lab at the time when I became pregnant. But I should say that I've actually been a lifelong insomniac. And when I joined this laboratory at Rockefeller and I was learning all about sleep and circadian rhythms, I understood what I had to do to help myself sleep better. So that was a way kind of taking the knowledge from the lab and applying it in the real world.
Now, let's expand upon that, because I saw in your biography, a lifelong insomniac, you had a baby and you thought you would never sleep again. So what did you discover? And then tell our audience how that led into some of the workshops that you did and eventually the book that you published.
Yeah, so one of the things we know from research is that light really matters when it comes to circadian rhythms. Light is the thing that tells our body what time it is. And so by manipulating light in our environment, either by going outside or by using specific types of lighting, we can affect our circadian clock. And in the lab, we use that every day because we have our lab animals, but the same actually happens in human labs that study humans. When we don't want the study subject, whether it's a fly, a mouse, or a human, to experience the effects of light, but we still need to see, we use red light, because red light does not affect our circadian clock. So I was standing in our dark room with a red flashlight because I was handling my experimental flies and I was quite pregnant, and I thought, why don't we use red light to help babies sleep? All life responds the same way to light, whether it's a fly or a baby, but often night lights for babies are blue, and blue is actually the light that activates our circadian rhythm and tells our body it's time to be awake. So it's like the opposite of what you would want if you want your baby to sleep, and then if you want yourself to sleep. So I got a bunch of red light bulbs and installed them. And I also felt that it helped me actually wind down at night, which makes sense because it naturally increases your melatonin release. And then, yeah, and then when I had my first daughter, I just used the red light and at night for any night wakings. And whenever I had to placate her at night or change a diaper, I only used red light. And I kind of used lighting during the day, a lot of light, at night only red light, to, and we call it entrain her circadian rhythm. And it worked really well because it's our biology. And then I thought, okay, what else do I know? What else could I use from my from my knowledge as a sleep scientist to apply to her sleep? And there's a couple of other things that are very clear to us as scientists that have not made it out into the real world. One of them is, for example, that there is this notion that sleep begets sleep, that a baby needs to sleep a lot during the day to sleep well at night. And that goes against everything we know from sleep science about our sleep need. We have a total daily sleep need that is daytime sleep plus nighttime sleep. And if I put you down for a 5-hour nap during the day, you're not going to be tired at night. And the same is true for babies. It's just more confusing because they get tired more quickly. So they do need to nap, but by making sure to keep that in balance, you can really maximize nighttime sleep. So I researched that and I figured out how much at every age a baby should be sleeping to sleep better at night. And that was basically the second big idea that made it into my method. And generally, just about circadian rhythms, the idea that we have an inner clock that is either reinforced by things that we do, like getting up at a certain time, like eating at a certain time, or is weakened if we do erratic wake times, erratic feeding times. And again, there is this notion in parenting that you should let the baby decide when to eat, when to sleep, when to do whatever baby wants, because it seems so intuitive. It seems kind of intuitive to do this baby-led parenting, it's called, but it doesn't make sense from a circadian perspective. And there is data that show that you can help a baby sleep through the night and be generally happier by helping them get on a schedule. So that's kind of the three things that I synthesized from my knowledge as a sleep scientist and chronobiologist: light, control night exposure, and watch the sleep need, and keep the circadian rhythms going. And the other thing that is really, I think, divisive in the parenting community is sleep training. A lot of people think that sleep training will harm your baby, and that if you let a baby cry.
Back a minute, tell our audience, what is sleep training?
So all these things that I just mentioned will naturally help a baby sleep more at night. But there is one more thing that I have to talk about, and that's the ability to fall asleep at all, which is not something that we're actually born with. It's a skill that we learn. We need to learn to be able to put ourselves to sleep. And that's something that babies struggle with, and that's why they cry. And we need to teach them to fall asleep, ideally on their own, if we want to sleep as well. Because if you teach them to need you to fall asleep, if you teach them that they need, for example, a nursing mother to fall asleep, or anything else, really, some people have called that sleep crutches. So if a baby needs to lay on top of you, if a baby needs to be carried around, if a baby needs to sleep with you, then the baby learns that this is what is required to fall asleep, and that becomes their mode of sleeping. So if we need, and I'm, for example, someone who's a bad sleeper, a light sleeper, I just can't sleep if someone is touching me or crawling on me. And, for me, it was just paramount to solve that. Other people, my husband, he doesn't care. And so if it's important for you that you have good sleep at night, then you need to teach your baby to be able to fall asleep on their own. And how do you do that? You do that with the things I mentioned earlier: control the light and train their rhythm and watch the naps. But there's one more thing, and that's called sleep training. You teach them, and it's like a very, controversial idea. I don't even want to call it sleep training anymore. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it teaching them to sleep through the night. You need to teach them to fall asleep on their own. And it's also called self-soothing. It's the ability to lay down and calm down and close your eyes and believe that you can make it on your own to fall asleep. And the most effective way that has been studied and rigorously to accomplish that is called sleep training. And that's simply, the idea is super simple. It just means when it's baby's bedtime and baby needs to sleep and baby is fussing or crying, but you are sure that they're fussing and crying because they're tired and need to sleep, then instead of somehow intervening and trying to make baby not cry in that situation, you just let them be. You let them be. For how long, it kind of doesn't matter. There are studies that show that just 90 seconds, waiting just 90 seconds is actually enough. That's why I actually recommend in my book, because I know how hard it is for a parent to hear their baby cry. So just by waiting 90 seconds each time, though, because you want to teach them that this is what's going to happen now. You're tired, you need to calm down, and you can do it. You don't need mom or dad. You don't need anyone. You can do it by yourself. So by just waiting 90 seconds, the baby learns, oh yeah, it feels uncomfortable, but I can do it. And so research shows that this is highly effective to teach a baby to sleep through the night. There are no negative side effects. There is no long-term consequences. And actually there are positive consequences. It has been shown that mothers are happier, mothers sleep better, parents are happier, and the children grow up to be well-adjusted kids who have no mental health problems or anything like that, and do well in school. So
quick question. What if they continue crying after 90 seconds? It goes to 2 or 3 minutes. Then do you go in?
Yeah, exactly. So my method, I call it actually gentle sleep training. It's gentle, it's on its surface, it's gentle to the baby, but really it's gentle on the parent. Because I was the parent that was sitting at the edge of my bed, counting the seconds until my own method told me I can finally go and help that baby, which is, we're biologically programmed to do that. So to not do that feels horrible. So I go in after 90 seconds and I pat the baby, and you say, it's, you use them. There's these ideas that just shushing and patting them comforts them. And then you do this for a few minutes and then you leave again. And then the cycle, the first time you do it, it might take a long time, like up to 45 minutes. Relatively speaking, 45 minutes is not a long time, but 45 minutes of crying is hard. So I tell the parents I work with, this might, yes, be ready for that. This will be excruciating, but just trust the process and the data that show that this will work. And typically after 1 to 2 nights, this is just over and everybody gets the sleep they need. So I really encourage people to find the inner strength to bear with it and to do it. There's all kinds of tricks around how to make it easier. It certainly helps to do this earlier than later, because if a baby is already a year old, they remember, and they're not going to be happy about the sudden change that occurs in their sleep routine. They're like, if they're used to being nursed to sleep, they'll be like, where is my boob? If they're used to co-sleeping, they'll be like, why am I supposed to sleep on my own? For a 3-month-old baby, much easier proposition. So doing it earlier rather than later is easier. Using your partner, who's, if you're nursing, is not nursing, is easier, because the baby smells actually the milk on the mother. And if they're used to being nursed to sleep, they'll be like, what, you're trying to placate me without nursing me? That doesn't make any sense. So there's all kinds of things to make this easier. Also evicting, I call it harshly, evicting the baby from your bedroom helps with this short delay, right? Because if the baby is right there crying, it's very hard to not tend to them. So just creating a little bit of distance helps. So there's a
Okay.
bunch of things we can do.
What about sound machine? I haven't heard you mention that. Is that a crutch or is that okay?
So I consider crutches anything that impair my ability to get sleep. Therefore, a sleep white noise machine, totally fine. And in fact, there is pretty good evidence that they also help the baby sleep, which is interesting, right? Why would noise help someone sleep? But we actually think it's because of the noises the babies experience when they're still inside of the mother's body. It's actually quite loud in there. And it seems like white noise might remind them of this cozy environment, which is the same reason, by the way, why swaddles are so effective. Um, Young babies, newborns, have these reflexes where they keep waking themselves up. And just by, doing this, you're kind of you're making them more tired, and they don't wake themselves up when they have this Moro reflex.
Oh, no, that's called swaddling, correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Now, that is my next question. What about the snoo? Do you know the snoo?
Yes. The snoo is based on a pediatrician's method of how to put babies to sleep. His name is Richard Ferber, and his method has become so popular, and his book was, still is, of course, one of the Bibles of baby sleep. And he came actually up with he came up with the idea of Ferberizing a baby, which is to soothe them to sleep, and that babies need certain, or that you can help a baby sleep by shushing, by swaddling, and what's the other S? There's like a couple of S's, and the snoo does them all. The snoo swaddles the baby, the snoo will shush the baby, and the snoo will rock the baby, because movement is another one that puts the baby to sleep. Again, probably because they were rocked in our bellies when we were pregnant. And the snoo does all these things, and kind of in an automated fashion. So I think it makes total sense. It's a very expensive thing, but then again, your sleep is also very valuable. So this really helps, or can help, a lot of people in the first couple of months, which some people even call the fourth trimester, because the babies are really small and like I said, can't put themselves to sleep yet. So this, it wasn't out yet when I had my kids, but if it would have been, I probably would have gotten it, because you're just a zombie. And this tool seems to be working quite well for a few months. I think it's important to still do the other, so it helps basically with the fourth thing that I described, the nighttime wakings, right? It's important to still do the other three, otherwise you have a baby that will wake up at night, and you have your snoo to take care of that. But once they grow out of the snoo, which happens very quickly because it's just really a bassinet for the first couple of months, then your baby will not have a good sleep cycle, and then you have to deal with that. So it can be a problem if the parents don't really do any of the other things that are important to teach a baby's body to be tired at the right time.
Okay, very good. Let's move on a little bit. Now, do you have an app that you've created?
Yes. So I really want to help parents in a way that addresses all their needs, and not everybody will be able to absorb my book in a way that helps them solve their baby sleep problems. So I thought, okay, let's forget about all that. Let's just make an app. You don't have to ever have heard about my lofty ideas. The app will, you just put in your baby's age and a few other parameters that I've identified are relevant for baby sleep, and the app will simply tell you what to do. It will tell you exactly when to put baby down. It will tell you, when to wake baby up, what to do with the light, and how to sleep at night. It will just do what the app tells you, and your baby will sleep. And so that's what I did, and it's called Kulala, Kulala, and yeah, people really like it, I think.
What does that mean?
So Kulala means sleep, in Swahili. I don't have any relation to it, but I thought it also sounded really cute, like a lullaby, kulala. Also, in terms of the light, I wanted actually to point out that Aboriginal communities in Africa don't have a lot of the sleep problems we have because they have a much stronger light-dark cycle. They don't have this constant dimness that we have during the day and the enhanced brightness that we have at night. So there is something there.
All right, what is the name of your book?
My book is called How Babies Sleep, and it's actually been translated now in 11 languages, including,
Congratulations.
yes, it's incredible. Here's a Japanese version.
Okay.
And I just been to Italy for a conference last week, a sleep conference, and I went in a bookstore in Florence and they had my book. So
The rush, right? That had to be a big rush.
it's incredible. And yeah, it's helping parents worldwide, and it's just incredible.
Okay, and we can buy that on Amazon. We don't have to go to Italy, correct?
You don't have to go to Italy. Yes, you can buy it anywhere books are sold.
Now, you also have a light that you sell. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I use these red light bulbs when I had my kids, but they're not really something that parents are going to use unless they're really dedicated, going to a hardware store, ordering that stuff on Amazon. It's just not an attractive, easy to use product for a parent. So I wanted to make something mostly for myself, but of course for everyone else too, to have a nice lamp that only does the one thing, which is provide light that does not suppress a baby's melatonin, because we want that sleep hormone to be high at night. And so we made this beautiful all wood lamp. It only emits light in the right wavelength, which is above 650 nanometer. I'm not sure you can see it well. And yeah, it's just, the perfect thing to complement my method. So you have the book to learn all about it. You have the app to know when to turn the light on. And then you have the light to, to turn on when you have to placate baby at night, when they're crying or when you are nursing, or when you're changing a diaper. So
how can our audience buy that lamp?
So we have a website. It's called Kulala Land, like La La Land, but with the KU in front of it, .com, kulalaland.com. And that's where you can learn about what we're doing, and you can buy my lamp, and you can learn about the app, and you can actually buy we call it Kulala Sleep System, which is the lamp, the book, and 6 months of the app subscription. So you have it all together in one package, like a starter package if you're pregnant, or if you're a sleep deprived parent, to get you out of that, or as a baby shower gift.
Regarding the lamp, is it LED technology in there?
Yes. LED technology has revolutionized lighting, and this is our chance now to really create lighting products that correspond to our physiology, because our eyes are highly sensitive to very specific wavelengths, and lighting like incandescent lighting just can't achieve the precision that LED lighting can. So this lamp is engineered to really only have wavelengths above 650 nanometers. So it's completely safe. It does not activate the IP-RGCs, which are the cells in our eyes that respond to blue light. So you can be 100% sure that this is inert for our circadian system. And I use it every night, actually.
It's beautiful. Beyond sleeping better, are there any other impacts of light on baby's health?
Yes, of course. So sleep is really just one of the, we call it outputs of the circadian clock. It's an important one, but it's only one. In fact, the more we learn about it, we realize that everything that happens in our body is on the clock, whether it's body temperature, whether it's hormones, whether it's bowel movements, but also things like mood, and even for babies, growth. There is data that show that NICU babies, so babies that are born prematurely, grow faster with circadian lighting. So by making the differences between daytime and nighttime in terms of light very, very strong, you can make a baby grow faster. So the effects go beyond sleep. Sleep is very important, mostly for the parent. The baby doesn't care whether they sleep during the day or at night, but the parent cares a lot. But having a strong circadian rhythm, and light is part of that, and sleep is part of that, will help the baby grow and be healthier and happier.
If a baby is raised without any concern for circadian entrainment whatsoever and is getting fluorescent light at night and they're just growing up that way, are there long-term damages, or can that be fixed at a later age?
Ooh. So I don't know, because that's research that's, I don't even know if anybody's doing a longitudinal study like that. That's actually something I would be very interested in studying. But it's very clear that, so our circadian rhythm is, the function of the circadian rhythm is basically for us to know what's going to happen next. So if you have a strong circadian rhythm, your body just knows, oh, I'm going to get food, I'm going to have lunch, and it starts preparing your digestive system and starts secreting enzymes. Or your body knows, oh, I'm tired and cranky and I'm going to get sleep, so I'm going to fall asleep now. And if you don't have that because of what you described, because of erratic behavior or erratic lighting, and all of that is collapsed, you're basically just constantly, your body doesn't know what's happening and your body is not as well organized. And yes, that will have detrimental effects on your health. And there is research that shows that, for example, constantly phase shifting people, business travelers or shift workers, they have serious health problems. And so you would imagine that starting like that early in life, when your organism is even more dependent on organization and on structure, would have negative outcomes.
Okay, interesting, fascinating. Closing comments?
I think light is, I've become totally obsessed with light and chronobiology. And I used to be a scientist who didn't care about applications at all. I just wanted to know how stuff works. But this is such a simple and powerful tool that we can use to make ourselves sleep better, feel better, and be healthier. And I think it's really important that people understand that, and that, companies create products to help achieve that. I'm sitting inside here and it's dim. It's really dim. The lighting inside is like, 10,000 or 1,000 times dimmer than outside. And that's why we get sick. And at night we stare at our screens and it's much brighter than it should be. So, it's so easy. It's just the light, and it will really help us live better. So I think it's exciting that people are working on this, that people are researching it, and we have a bright future ahead of us if we use this what basically nature has provided us with.
Sure. Well, Dr. Axelrod, thank you so much for speaking to our audience today, and please stay tuned now for a few questions.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Axelrod, thank you very much for that. We will now open the floor for questions. I'd now like to introduce our producer of Let's Talk About Light and Health, and that is Allison Thayer. And Allison will moderate the questions. So Allison, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Axelrod, for that interview too. That was really interesting. And again, we want to open up the floor to anybody, parents, anybody who's going through this, and we'd love to hear from you about your questions. So if you don't mind though, I actually have a question myself that I'm wondering about. So you talked a bit about entrainment of sleep, which is generally getting your body to be awake during the day and asleep at night. And from other talks, we've learned that bright light during the day and then that dimmer light at night, or that red light that doesn't suppress your melatonin, is really important to have at night so that we don't disturb our circadian clocks. But then for babies, I'm wondering, for napping during the day, can you talk a bit more about a lighting schedule for babies that is during the day, where, how does that fit in with a nap schedule? And do they have the same effect that we have from light during the day.
Right. It's confusing. So it seems like that, I think that's like very confusing to parents because they don't have the same sleep-wake pattern like we do. And that would nicely fit together with our circadian rhythms and everything I just talked about in terms of lots of light during the day, no light at night, and sleep at night. But babies do sleep during the day. So what does that mean? And that goes back to the other kind of system I described, which is the sleep pressure. Babies' sleep pressure rises a lot quicker than ours. So yes, they do need to sleep during the day, but that's somewhat decoupled from the circadian rhythms. And so ergo, that means for the lighting, my recommend, it hasn't been like, nobody studied this specifically, but if we go back to what circadian rhythms are doing, and how light entrains our circadian clock, you would not want to necessarily, especially for newborns, put them in complete darkness for naps. Especially in the very early days, it's really important to establish these very robust patterns and, make the day as different from the night as possible in terms of light, but also in terms of, for example, where the baby is sleeping. I would always put them at night in the exact same spot, complete darkness, very quiet. But during the day, I wouldn't actually do all these things. I wouldn't keep it too quiet. I wouldn't make it too dark, so that the baby, of course, can nap, and we want to encourage that, but also that the body and the baby from day one understands on a physiological level that daytime sleep is different from nighttime sleep. Otherwise, you will, if you provide the perfect sleep environment during the day, you will end up with a baby that sleeps potentially too much during the day, and then that shortens nighttime sleep. And that's the people who then I see, and they come to me and they say, yeah, my baby sleeps 6 hours during the day and doesn't want to sleep at night. Why? And so you can lay that foundation in the early days.
How important is it for the baby that mom is getting proper light-dark cycles during pregnancy?
That's a great question. And the research on this is developing, but all data that I know of indicate that it's the mother's circadian rhythm that even during pregnancy already informs the fetal circadian rhythm. And there is also peculiarities about a pregnant woman's circadian rhythm. They shift earlier in early pregnancy, which is interesting. But overall, the recommendation would be, yes, you should try to already, before you give birth, try to entrain yourself, because it's quite likely that will entrain the unborn baby. And then when they're born, they already have a more robust circadian rhythm.
So that's great. And it kind of fits into, Robert had another question about what do we know about sleep architecture of babies throughout the course of the day? Is nighttime sleep different than daytime sleep? I kind of answered that a little bit. Do you have anything else to comment on that?
Sleep architecture. So I don't know that there is a lot known about that, but I think in terms of our sleep, which ultimately is my goal of maximizing, I operate under the assumption that there is not a big difference in terms of sleep quality. Babies need a lot of sleep, and there are interesting studies coming out around like how sleep is actually different in young babies from older children, fundamentally different. And we think in young children, sleep has developmental functions that sleep for us doesn't have because we're fully developed. But that being said, there is a lot of flexibility on our part in terms of what we decide when a baby should be sleeping. And you have more power than you think in deciding when a baby should be sleeping. And you can kind of align it, not completely, of course, but you can shift the baby's sleep to align with your schedule. And light and sleep pressure are the two knobs we can turn.
So next question we have from Dennis in the chat. Would you like to ask your question, Dennis?
Appreciate it. And we may have already spoken about this a little bit, but I was curious with babies, and my son was a problem sleeper, or maybe it was myself with his training. But yeah, it would be the idea of, do babies need a certain time during the day, either after the nap or something like that, where they would really benefit from bright light, so to speak, to entrain them?
Yeah. Great question. Nobody knows that, but the fact that babies are so sensitive to light, and we don't know really why. Some people think because their eyes are more clear. And it's very clear that bright light at night wipes out their melatonin. So nobody tested that you need, like, that you can also help with sleep at night and with circadian rhythms by providing more light during the day. But everything we know about circadian rhythms would suggest that, yes, you would want to expose baby to plenty of light during the day. People say go for a walk and things like that, but also from that angle, absolutely. Also for naps, don't make it too dark, especially for newborns. They will sleep wherever. So I can't tell you, some specific regimen in terms of how much light I would recommend, but I would just say as much as possible. Some people live in apartments or houses that don't have a lot of natural light. That's something I would pay attention to. And there is right now no solutions for lighting that would generate outdoor lighting conditions indoors, apart from these seasonal affective disorder lamps. And nobody has tested how babies react to that, but you want to generally increase the amount of light a baby has during the day based on our general understanding of circadian rhythms.
And to clarify and kind of going to the next question too, do you want red light during the day, or do you want a different type of light?
No red light during the day. For all the reasons I just explained, I call it night mode and day mode, and the red light is night mode. So either complete darkness, or if you have to see because you need to placate your baby, because you need to change a diaper, red light is safe. But during the day, older kids do need certain conditions to be able to nap. So you can't just, put a 2-year-old in a bright, loud room. So for sure, we have to help older kids to sleep better, but I would leave the red light out of it. You typically, anyway, during the day, usually no amount of blackout shades can, create the complete darkness that we have at night. So the red light is kind of useless for that. And anyway, we wouldn't want to use the red light in that way, because the red light, allows melatonin. We wouldn't want the complete darkness and red light during the day, because we don't actually want melatonin to go up during the day.
So the next question we have from Mark: do babies have weekends that follow their parents' shift from weekday working to weekend socializing? And what would a babysitter do? Do we keep the baby on the workday schedule?
Great question. Very important to not do that. It's super important to not change anything, and that's, nobody wants to hear that. Right? On the weekend, you just want to sleep in, and you want to relax, and that's something I actually ended up fixing about my own sleep when I joined Mike's lab, and then for my kids even more so. You don't want to do that. You want to be really on the clock and on the weekend to not do this shift, which is basically introducing jet lag or social jet lag into everybody's schedule. And the problem with that is that overall just weakens the circadian rhythm. So if you had a really good schedule during the week, and your child's and your own body now really knows, oh, at like whatever, this and this time, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep, and everything is aligned, and the sleep hormone is working in your advantage, and then it just all erodes over the weekend, then all that just goes away a little bit, and then your body doesn't know anymore what's going on, and your baby's body doesn't know anymore what's going on. What does that mean? They'll be sort of sleepy and cranky, because their sleep need and their sleep pressure is not aligned anymore with circadian rhythms. And so, as annoying as that is, I totally advocate for not changing anything ever. Caregivers, get them all on the same, tell them what's going on, tell them that you have that schedule and why you have that schedule. Don't let the grandma let the baby sleep all day. A struggle I had personally is, for example, in the daycare, where sometimes napping is just, they just nap for hours and hours, and then those nights during daycare, during the days that a baby or a child goes to daycare, suddenly bedtime then ends up being much, much later. And parents are like, why is that? And what can I do about that? The only thing is to shorten that now. And overall, you don't want these changes. You don't want the weekends to look different from weekdays. You want everything always the same. As hard as that is, that is kind of an organizing principle that if you follow that, everything else becomes easier. So that's why I would advocate for that.
How long before bedtime should we limit screen exposure for toddlers?
Yeah, that's another big one. Also, even earlier, like when you're, for example, when you're feeding baby and in the early days, that can take a long time. And what does a mom do when she's, for example, nursing a baby? She's on her phone, and I think that's totally valid. And I don't want to take that away from anyone. And the good news is we have tools to make the screens dimmer. And we have these filters now that are now built into iOS and also Androids that make the screen filter out the blue light. On top of that, you can find additional apps that make it even red. I have, I'm totally, I'm very strict about this. So I actually have an app that makes the screen red. So you don't need to limit screen time, but if that's something that you need as a last resort because the kids are going crazy and you want them to watch their show for half an hour, that's fine. Just make sure if it's on an iPad, make it dim and yellow or even red. If it's a TV, it's much harder. I actually have on the TVs in our apartment different modes that I manually installed, where I have modes that are very dark. And you can actually, if you're so inclined, filter out the colors, but it's not easy. So if you don't have these tools to filter out the blue light, then I would stop doing any screen time 1 hour before bedtime. Not much longer, actually, because this is quite dynamic.
Is it fair to say that a baby's day is shorter and they should have more cycles in 24 hours than adults?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. It might seem like that if we about sleep as kind of an indicator of circadian rhythms, or how many times we sleep, right? You could say, if we sleep once and we sleep one time in 24 hours, so our day is 24, or our circadian rhythm is 24 hours, baby sleeps 5 times, maybe its circadian rhythm is only 5 hours. But that's not the case. So that speaks to this, to these two processes that really determine sleep timing. And one of them is circadian rhythms, and the other is sleep pressure. And so for adults, these two things just come together, and our sleep pressure is, high, is very high and needs to be filled once a day. And our circadian rhythms are 24 hours, so it fits together. And for babies, they just need to do that more often because their sleep pressure rises much quicker, but their circadian rhythm is still 24 hours. So I would say that baby circadian rhythm is just like ours. It's weaker and it needs more entrainment, which is why all these things are extra important. In adults, our sleep, our daily sleep, which happens only once, is actually another thing that entrains our circadian rhythm. In a way, you can think of anything we do or don't do as either strengthening or weakening our circadian rhythm. So light is just one of them. Food is another one, but sleep itself, or when we are active, when we're moving, when we're not moving, is another one. So, the erratic nature of babies' sleep-wake patterns also weakens the circadian rhythm, but their circadian rhythm itself is still 24 hours. So we have to work with other aspects of the circadian rhythm to increase the amplitude, because the sleeps will not do that. The sleeps are, much more often than every 24 hours.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Trish's question kind of fits in with that. Trish, would you like to ask yours?
Hello, I have a niece and friends' children. I'm a grandmother age, but what's the nap time length for 3 months, 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year? When do they abandon naps? How long should they be?
Oh, yeah, that's another huge source of confusion for parents on top, and grandparents and caregivers on top of everything else we just discussed. Sleep need in babies changes so quickly that it's hard to stay on top of it. And a baby that slept last week might not sleep well this week anymore. And what I've found, and there is solid evidence for that, is that it's usually because their sleep need is going down. I mean, it's going only one way. Babies are different, sure, but all babies sleep more when they're younger than when they're older, right? We sleep between whatever 6 and 8 hours. Babies sleep 20 hours when they're born, and already only 12 hours in 24 hours when they're 1 year old. So there's huge changes happening, and it's really hard to understand what's going on. Now, the good news is that people have tracked baby sleep, and we know pretty precisely how much babies sleep at any age group. And one can just map that out. And then the thing is, yes, there is variability between babies. So I can tell you the average for each age, and then your baby's sleep might be a little higher or a little lower. But what's clear is that if your baby or if your grandchild used to sleep and doesn't sleep anymore, that means that the trajectory went down, that the sleep need did decrease. And it is useful to know that and to know what the average is and just default to that. So, if in my book, I have all the charts, and I also have an app, by the way, that I recommend that has all these schedules. So you just put in your grandchild's age, and if it's a young baby, the weight is also important. And then it basically gives you the right schedule for any age group, and also for when the parent wants to get up in the morning. That's when I said you can kind of shift that around. You don't have to just resign to getting up at 5 a.m. if you don't want to. And so if your baby is someone who needs more sleep than others, that's fine. But if they used to sleep and don't sleep anymore, then I would recommend looking at that schedule and just reducing the nap time to whatever the average is, because we know, that's okay, because thousands of babies sleep like that. So, parents are very worried about, or grandparents, about waking a sleeping baby. And I give you permission to do that. It's okay. And the baby will be fine, and they will sleep better at night because we have this total sleep need. So I don't have the exact schedules off the top of my head. I can post them in the chat later, or you can download my app and just get them from there.
Does the time that you feed the baby impact or help the circadian treatment as well? And also what you're feeding the baby or toddler, does that impact circadian treatment?
Yes and yes. However, again, it's confusing because in the very beginning, it's just the baby is so erratic, and you're told also, depending on the weight of your baby, you have to feed on a certain schedule. Like, many pediatricians will make you feed the baby, for example, every 2 hours during the day. And then kind of you can't do anything about that because the baby just needs to grow. And the main imperative of everything is just to regain birth weight and to establish a growth pattern. And so you can't really impose any schedule on that, and you shouldn't. That's where, for example, the robust light dark patterns are kind of the circadian entrainment you can offer the baby when the feeding and the sleep cannot. Later, then, as soon as they regain their birth weight, and then they start let them sleep at night. That's when you start noticing, oh, okay, my baby starts falling asleep after this many hours, and that's when you can start kind of working towards a schedule. And the same with the feeding. So I think parents don't realize that when they have regained their birth weight, and with the pediatrician's clearance, you don't have to stay on this extremely tight feeding schedule. And so I would ask your pediatrician to how far should my baby be able to go without food, and stick to that, because if you end up nursing or feeding them more frequently than that, then that becomes something the baby just gets used to, just like the sleep. And so, yes, absolutely, feeding times can be used to entrain circadian rhythms, but I would figure out with the pediatrician for very young babies what that should be. For babies that have regained the birth weight, typically you can go 3 to 4 hours without feeding. So getting out of this constant feeding pattern that parents have with very young babies is very important. And the other thing was about the food composition. Yeah, so that's super interesting. For nursing mothers, it has been actually shown that the milk composition changes in a circadian fashion over the course of day and night. And that pertains to the nutrient composition of the food, of the breast milk. It's a lot more fatty at night. And you would, one would think, and lactation consultants recommend, for example, if you pump, to give the pumped milk at the same time when you pumped it, because the theory goes that it helps the baby sleep better at night when they get the night milk, because it's much fattier, and also it is actually enhanced in hormones from the mom that help a baby sleep better at night. So yes, in terms of breast milk, for sure. In terms of formula, no, because it's not, there's no variability in that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. And we'll have one more question just to wrap up. I think it's a nice one to wrap up with. How broadly do pediatricians embrace your philosophy?
I honestly think that's why I even got into this whole thing, because baby sleep is not a medical problem, right? A baby that doesn't sleep is kind of nobody's problem except for the overwhelmed parents. So you go to your pediatrician, and as long as the baby grows, their job is done. That's really the only thing that matters for a young baby, that they grow. And so, they might throw you some advice, and of course, there's probably pediatricians who are much more into helping with that than others. But ultimately, there is really nobody there that will specifically help with baby sleep, because it's just not a medical problem. It doesn't matter for baby's growth, really, whether they sleep during the day and then not at night, sleep depriving the parent, or whether they're perfect sleepers and sleep at night. That will not matter for their growth, and therefore pediatricians don't necessarily have the training, or it's just also not in their wheelhouse, really. And so that's where someone like I really come in to fill that gap. And yes, of course, I have I'm talking to pediatricians, like my pediatrician and other people, to get that word out there, because I really think that when you become a mother, you just need to sleep. And again, who exactly will help you with that? It's not the pediatrician, it's not the GP, it's who, it's not the OBGYN. You're just kind of thrown into the deep end, and it's hard. So yeah, I think this should become something that is more integrated into the healthcare system. I think that would be very important.
Do you know of any support groups, or have you been a part of anything that you've been able to talk to people more on a mom level about this?
So we have been very active in our own outreach. We have a Facebook group that is called Science-Based Baby Sleep Support. Again, because there's just so many opinions out there, and I think it's important to talk about things in an emotional way, because this is all very emotional, but always from the perspective, what can we support with data versus what is just more a philosophical question that nobody can really answer. And there's all these trigger things: co-sleeping, sleep training, all these things. People are very emotional about all that, and we can discuss these things in an empathetic way, I think, but from the perspective of science. So you can find that. Maybe I can post that in the chat later if you want to community support.
I think we're ready to wrap up now. And Dr. Axelrod, I want to thank you. I think your talk was just great, and I sure learned a lot, and I know our audience did as well. Allison, our producer, we want to thank you and the Light and Health Research Center for Mount Sinai for making this happen. And last, we want to thank our audience. We had great participation today, and we really do appreciate these questions. And then just please do remember, on 25 April, hold the coffee, perking up the office with light, and that will be at noon Eastern. Sign up at lightandhealth.eventbrite.com. Thank you all.